Hey there, welcome to episode 17 of the Cafe Genius Impresarios audio program. Today is the 23rd of June, 2023. It's Friday, yay! Today's episode is solo. You get to listen to me, Dan Hugo, the somehow sitting at the head of a round table of the Cafe Genius project. Hacking the roundtables, today's episode. Let's talk about, first of all, what is the roundtable, but what we need to do with it. So, round table without a space, the round table, as if you are hearkening back to the times of, well, the knights of the round table. The round table, the notion is that there is no head of the table. So everyone is supposed to be on sort of a level playing field. We've had 2 cohorts of round table participation since January of 2023. January, February, March, April, May, June. So here we are at the end of June. The final meeting of the second cohort is on the 26th of June. And at that point, we can probably have this discussion in person, but I just wanted to think out loud a bit on a Friday. I didn't have a guest. It's been tricky to get guests lately. There's a lot of things going on, and for me too. So hunting down busy people is already hard, or difficult if you like. So the summary, as I've written here, the second cohort is coming to an end. It's time to hack the table and see what we do next. So first of all, if you don't know what I'm talking about, the Round Table project was started, conceived of it in December, I think. November, December. It was probably December sometime. It occurred to me a deeper understanding of what our entrepreneurial, I'm not able to speak today, entrepreneurial ecosystem, what it was doing, what's working, what isn't working. There was at the time, I think it was November. It must have been November. I think I had just learned that, no, it was December. Well, either way, doesn't matter. I had just learned that Mo Collins would be visiting Nevada, surveying, asking questions, doing some research and studying the entrepreneurial ecosystem across the state and regionally. I have since had a podcast episode, a nice discussion with Mo. Her report has been out for a while. Check out that episode. You should listen to all of the episodes of the show. I'll insert some subliminal advertising to that effect in another episode. But Mo created a document, 101 pages long, about our ecosystem. My theory was it'd be interesting to have people on the ground, so to speak, entrepreneurs here in the greater Vegas entrepreneurial ecosystem, which, by the way, I don't know who came up with this. I've seen it written more and more now. I've seen more use of the term ecosystem instead of community, which is sensible. Communities are emergent, in my opinion. They do not just magically come to be, whereas ecosystems are a little bit more concrete and much less easy, more difficult to change. There are biological or analogs found in nature, if you will, right? So an ecosystem of animals, birds, plants, pets, rodents, whatever, the flora and fauna of an ecosystem, they emerge over time, but over very long periods of time. And then it's difficult to change them. So climax community is the term. It is ironically, an ecosystem of the climax community. Now, the climax community of a redwood forest is redwood trees. When you burn it down to the ground and destroy everything, and then you give it enough time, guess what grows back? The climax community, redwood trees. And then the other sort of symbiotic relations, and parasitic probably, but predators and prey and all that. But the redwood trees in a redwood forest are the climax community. Similarly, I would posit, if you like, that the climax community of the Southern Nevada desert is a desert. And so we must exert energy. We must pour in water and supply electricity. We must pave roads and build buildings, air condition. Thank you, Carnot Cycle. Thank you so much. Air condition and otherwise, and heat in the summer. Same possible with the heat pump. But we have to do a lot of work to maintain the non-climax community, right? So desert animals start to appear. Habitat encroachment is a real thing. So the ecosystem of the greater Vegas area naturally, ecologically, is not humans running around starting companies. So that's sort of an important starting point. It's not often considered. One thinks they can build communities, but always remember you're building a community on an ecosystem that is not natural. So the communities that form here are fine. Some of them are insular. Some of them are isolated. Some of them are just doing their thing, interact as needed. Some of them receive a lot of support financially or emotionally, or, so people are aware of them. They get coverage in the local media. Some communities do not. Some thrive, some not so much. So the ecosystem of our nature, our natural ecosystem, and our entrepreneurial ecosystem that is a substantial component of our economy sort of have some similar challenges because they are not necessarily natural. They are not necessarily self-fulfilling. They're not they require energy, right? So I made the analogy about I made the comparison of changing our biological or natural ecosystem from desert to thriving human. Similarly, our ecosystem in that context has grown over time from I think the 30s into a destination city. We have, according to the latest numbers, minus that car that just drove by, if you heard that, we have approximately 40 million tourists. So we're doing okay on that front. As a destination city, you want to have people coming here and then leaving. So about 40 million annualized, which is nice. Our population of Southern Nevada is something like 2.3 or 2.5 million. So it's not bad. That's a hospitality, tourism, entertainment, vices economy population of visitors, right? So they're here for conventions, they're here to party, they're here to see a show, gamble, go shopping, maybe various restaurants. So they're consuming, they're enjoying, they're leisurely vacationing cadre of humans that come and visit from all walks of life all over the world, which is kind of neat, actually, when you think about it. So the entrepreneurial ecosystem, what it would try to do in one version is simply continue to enable small businesses and people to try their ideas, to start companies, to start services, to take part in this 40 million visitor economy, and or the local component of the economy, right? The locals discount if you're from here, that's a thing sometimes. So you can participate in the general entrepreneurial ecosystem, or you may subscribe to the notion that the greater Vegas entrepreneurial ecosystem is destined to become Silicon Valley. Let's convert our redwood forest into a lush rainforest. Piece of cake, right? Totally simple. Or how about a savanna? Or maybe a Great Plain, or maybe a desert. That would be a lot easier. But the transition from one major ecosystem to another takes a lot of energy. Those examples I just gave would require fundamental shifts in resources and climate and flora and fauna, like who and what is living in a place with a certain amount of water, a certain number of nutrients in the soil, a certain wind pattern, temperature range, humidity, all the components that make for the climax community to thrive. We can make analogs to our ecosystem on the entrepreneurial side. So do we have the 4 pillars? Do we have education and talent pool? Do we have access to capital? Access to capital, the most important thing. Not really. Do we have a community of people? And when I say community, I actually mean multiple communities, right? There will be multiple interests and particular groups and gatherings, whether geographical, common background, common business focus. So we'll just lump that into one big community, but it's essentially a sense of community when you really think about it. And then support from the government. Government is usually responsible. That's a good way to start a sentence. For infrastructure, for regulation, for protecting people from themselves, making sure that fraud is not committed, that we have internet access, and that we have roads and all these other things. So we have the 4 pillars that are they are not going to go away. Theoretically, the government of the greater Vegas ecosystem will not close up shop and move to California or Austin anytime, or Texas anytime soon. So these our educational facilities are only getting more robust. They're growing up, maybe almost ready to go to college themselves. We do have access to capital. It's just not as easy as people would like it to be. That may be a two-way street regarding confidence and just plain old awareness. So the community part, the communities, are there communities here that are functional and communicative and collaborative? Are they symbiotic? Are they parasitic? That's a good question. I like to use, going back to the biological ecosystem analogy, the bees and the flowers are symbiotic, right? You got to have both. And so if you sacrifice one, you lose the other. I similarly suggest that bartenders and entrepreneurs need each other, or you could say, any sort of service industry. But simplifying it to bartenders and programmers, for example, they go together like peas and carrots. So if you decide that you want to have more programmers and you import people from the Bay Area, from Austin, and you gentrify the cost of living, it becomes more expensive to be here. You might have fewer bartenders, although bartenders do pretty well, but stick with me. You might have fewer bartenders, and so there will be fewer flowers and more bees, and then there can't be more bees. So mixing metaphors, but it all works out in the end. So these are the things that we need to understand, and determining what works and what doesn't in general, right? So shifting the focus of our economy, assuming incorrectly or correctly that the ecosystem will just exhibit some elastic properties as needed. And I believe what probably people are thinking is plastic properties, that it will actually change shape by just applying the right forces, and it will stay there. And then what doesn't work is we can actually learn quite a bit from the downtown project era. And then the report that Mo Collins wrote has some comparisons with other cities. So yeah, there's a lot to consider, historically, geographically, other localities, and then just here day to day in situ. If I'm an entrepreneur here, I have some ideas about what works and what doesn't in general. The classic elephant problem, trying to identify an elephant from different parts of the room by touch or by smell, who knows? But so everybody's going to have a slightly different view. Hence, the roundtable made up of entrepreneurs on the ground, willing and interested in actually considering the things, the components, the elements, the works, the doesn't works, to gain a greater understanding of what the shape of the ecosystem, like what does it look like right now, if it is going to change, if it's going to be plastic or elastic. What does it look like now? How do we even measure it? And how do we go about doing that? So those were the three things that we sort of established. Ideally as well, I had this plan early on to try to establish a fix for what I was calling the last mile. This was something that occurred during the downtown project days. I learned of it contemporaneously, 10 years ago, 8 years ago. You can read about it in other situations. People move to a new city to start a new thing. And what do they end up with? They end up saying, oh, I thought there would be resources available. I thought it would be very similar to where I came from. Or I was told there would be cake. That's a joke. But I was told there'd be mentorship. I was told there'd be advice. I was told there'd be talent pool to draw from, to hire into my startup idea, and so on and so on. So there's at least one campaign, maybe more, to encourage people to become local, to move their company, to live and work in Vegas, et cetera, et cetera. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. It may set a collection of expectations that will be difficult for people who are not on top of that, who don't ask the right questions beforehand. When they get here, it might be difficult for them to execute with the unexpected surrounding them. So, for example, I mentioned I was told there'd be mentorship, for example. So if you, in the downtown project days, and this was anecdotal at the time, so some people described to me when they arrived, they received a story and a loose, non-binding promises, I'm sure, come to downtown Vegas. There's a startup community. There's serendipitous collisions and all that, which is fine. There's no, in this case, I think it was more a lack of meeting of the minds, so to speak, which is not malicious, but it is probably what happens often. So messaging and expectation mismatch, right? So you hear about downtown Vegas, you make your pilgrimage to downtown. Maybe you sleep on a couch, you stay in the Huntridge startup houses or whatever they were called, the Startup Row, I think it was. You couch surf, you have a crash pad, maybe you try out the downtown life. There are a variety of ways to kind of stick your toe in the water. And then when you are hanging out and you have a startup idea, or maybe you brought one with you, or you meet people and you collaborate, maybe you do a startup weekend event or something similar, and you end up getting some VTF funding or there were some other choices, but say Vegas Tech Fund gave you a chunk of change and you were able to live in the Ogden or the Jewel or some other housing arrangements, and you tried to start your company, but somewhere along the way you were thinking, I spend a lot of time hanging out. I go to community dinners and podcasts, and there's a lot of Fernet flowing. And if you don't like Fernet, you probably were in trouble. But there was a lot of socializing, a lot of good times. And then, as I heard from people, I didn't really know what I was doing, or I was hoping there'd be more mentorship or some guidance, or even just a little bit of help. There just wasn't the things that they needed. And what those needs were varied per person, right? So some people had different levels of experience, or if you were really going outside the box, maybe you were pursuing your dreams, which is fine. This is not meant to be mean to anyone. It's very practical. So if I moved to Vegas to start a robot bartender company or something, sure. I do the electronics and computer software and robotics and all these traditional things, but I want to take a twist on that. I want to pivot a little bit and get into the bartending by robot business. So when I would get here and I didn't know how to do that, so I was just smart enough to get myself in trouble. Maybe I took some funding. Maybe I was trying to figure out who could help me make this happen. I spent a lot of time hanging out at various bars and meetups and hangouts and whatnot. I went to UserLib and did the jellies and went to the podcast and all these nice things. And at the end of Runway, I found that I didn't actually know how to make a bartending robot. I could make the robot. I could even make it bartend. But if I called it a bartending robot and tried to sell it to someone or make a sustainable business, I had no idea what I was doing, right, in this scenario. So I heard a lot of stories similar to that. And so the question was, is that mode of operation, leaving it to chance, letting people chart their own course, is that going to work for the bigger picture if you're encouraging people to come here? So my theory was, if we establish a cadre of entrepreneurs in residence, you sometimes hear the term EIR, and there were EIRs in the downtown project, at least probably 2 or 3 that I know of. The VTF had an EIR, usually venture capitalist companies, maybe law firms that deal with entrepreneurs, startups. They'll have an entrepreneur in residence to kind of be the, I'll say guinea pig, but that's not really the way it is. But you have someone who's been there, done that, still wearing the t-shirt, probably some cargo shorts or something. And those people know from the perspective of a person starting a company or being entrepreneurial, right? They are there. They know what's up. So if you are if you're an attorney or you work at maybe a university or someone, you are not versed in the ways of the entrepreneurial ecosystem from that perspective. So it's nice to have those people around. So if we could develop a cadre of EIRs in various verticals, right? So maybe some restaurant or retail, service industry in general, various types of businesses, right? I have a proclivity for food truck related mobile vending in general. So maybe I have some thoughts and inputs on there, though I have never owned a food truck, which for some is a deal breaker, but not us, right? You're listening to this now because you don't care if I own a food truck or not, hopefully. But so the EIR cadre would be a substantial component of providing a stable platform on which to try your hand in entrepreneurialism once you get here. And I will use a virtualized form of getting here let's say I'm an aspirational entrepreneur. I live in Las Vegas. I think I want to start a company of some sort. I kind of have a half an idea, but I don't know where to go from there. So I'm aspirational, or maybe I've got the whiteboard filled in with details. I've got my lean canvas filled out. I've done some SWOT analysis. I am nascent. I am ready to go. I'm about to figure out, what do I actually have to do? Which forms do I file? Which fees do I pay? I'm getting ready to go. Or maybe I actually have started a company. Maybe I'm physically already in Vegas. Maybe I'm moving here. Maybe I'm just going to visit. Maybe I'm not going to come here. Maybe be completely virtual and just come here when I need to. But I'll form a foreign corporation, or, there's a variety of implementation modes. So once I get here, then what? So having some people to talk to who know what they're doing was kind of the idea. And I think that will be infinitely useful if there is a desire to build up economic diversity, right? You cannot assume that everybody just knows how to start a company and wish them the best if they come here and we don't have all the pieces in place. Oftentimes, the advice was, do you know Jamie Schwartz? Do you know Josh Levitt? Do you know, I'm trying to think of the other, there's a couple other people, but it was always those two at least. Frick and frack, as my as my relatives might say. But two very competent, capable people. That's not the problem. The problem is it's two people. That doesn't scale, and especially because they don't necessarily have the job of answering your questions. They have other things to do. So relying on individuals to be the Sherpas or the guides for people coming to town to start their companies is not fair, and it's also not, it doesn't scale, and it's just not it's not best practices. So we had our first cohort. The first cohort was fine. We established the three main focus areas for OKR. So it's the shape of the ecosystem. What does it look like? Who's in it? What does it do? What does it have? What works, what doesn't. Components are sort of the status of the ecosystem. So what is it? And then the metrics that we would use to measure it. So when you determine what works and what doesn't, some sort of magnitude, how much is it not working? Like, which are the really important things? Which are the things that are not such a big deal? Eventually, it'd be nice to figure out if there were relationships between any of them. So, improving one destroys the other, vice versa. And then strategy, which is how do we get from current state of affairs to measurably better, whatever better means. So either measure along the way so that we can actually chart that course and be sure we stick to it. So what do we measure of what we have? How do we make positive changes, right? Those make sense. So the first cohort came up with a skeleton of those three things. The second cohort was supposed to kind of take the baton and run with it. There wasn't necessarily a smooth handoff. There wasn't necessarily adoption of the second sort of phase. The second cohort was going to pursue. I stole the idea from my Innovate for Vegas Foundation. I stole it from myself, so don't worry. And I found that there we talk about ideation, innovation, implementation. So you think about some ideas. When you come up with, here's kind of what we want to do or what we want to accomplish, you innovate to figure out how you're going to get there, right? So in our model, the ideation would, figuring out what the ecosystem is. The innovation might be the strategy, like, what can we do to get there? And then implementation requires, in this case, I'm kind of forcing this a little bit, but implementation requires some metrics so that as you're building it that it's working or not working, right? So you actually can iterate, to throw in another I word. So I figured first cohort, innovate, second cohort, first cohort, ideate, which we did, second cohort, innovate, which we really didn't, and third cohort, implement, and fourth cohort, thank you, Matthew, and I think it was Matthew just boarded out, introspect. So examine the journey of the four cohorts, the fourth cohort doing that. So that seemed like a reasonable plan. A couple problems. People have to show up. They have to be engaged. They have to treat it as if it were a job, which it isn't, which makes it tricky. You can't impose too much expectation on volunteers because they are volunteers. We were pursuing a consensus schedule mode. So we attempt to have 100% turnout. We're talking 7 people. So not a room full, but that was also difficult on top of communication and continuity and focus and intent. So these were all sort of left to chance. My presumption, maybe others had the same at the table, was that a roundtable of entrepreneurs will have a certain amount of self-determination that may be at odds. So they may want to do their own thing, but on the other hand, they would probably show up if they accepted the reasoning, like this is a to spend time on. And so they would. That was a bad assumption in general because people have other things to do. And so I think leaving this to chance, similar to the last mile problem of the entrepreneur doing the opposite of leaving Las Vegas. When they get here, the last mile is a little bit confusing. Similarly, leaving the members of the roundtable to sort of look after their own progress and participation without direction was not as easy as food for thought, lesson learned. At this time, there probably will not be a third and fourth cohort for the rest of the year. The time has come to hack the roundtable and hack a reboot. So what is that? What is that even going to be? And my allergies, very obviously. I'm enjoying the second part of my allergic reaction to Las Vegas. So first of all, the consensus scheduling thing was an interesting idea, but it doesn't work. So it's probably off the table, the round one. So almost certainly the notion of having a lockstep meetup every month where everybody has to attend, and that's mostly about responsible and intentionality, right? Like, yeah, I'm going to be there. I'm not going to just blow it off. I'm not going to flake. It's not a floating event. It's, you're part of this organization. It's only 7 people for the first cohort. I think arguably 6 people for the second one, maybe 7, if you count Jason, so intentionality is more important than consensus scheduling. So then the question is, do we have to have a monthly meetup with consensus scheduling, or should we meet as needed in subgroups and treat those as scheduled, or, if you want to show up or not, that's up to you. So we remove the lockstep the roundtable doesn't have to be full of people all the time. So aiming for more of a community of practice seems like a better idea. If we have a community of entrepreneurs within our ecosystem from different verticals, if we can find some restaurant owners, coffee shop owners, this was my intent the whole time, was to have people from different vertical areas to participate in this. The problem with the cohort scheme, with the begin and end, the intent was to enable people to not focus too much time of their entrepreneurial schedules because everybody's busy. So we don't want to rob people of time by overcommitting them to an extended, sort of infinitely long cycle of monthly meetups and discussions and devolving into social gatherings. But if we don't have the same people participating, then we may lose out on sort of the continuity of the discussion and any ideas that were emerging from that and then going on to implement them. So all that sounds good, but at the end of the day, this isn't an impetus to participate with the consensus scheduling for 100% attendance or deliverables, things like this. This is a volunteer gathering of, we'll say, subject matter experts, perhaps. So SMEs have a lot of things to do, and contributing their thoughts and deliberation time to the roundtable effort is something that is good if they want to contribute it, but it's not something to weigh down everyone with as far as consensus and attendance. So that's probably going to be replaced by a more, I'm not going to say traditional because it's not that old, but a more accessible community of practice model where intentionality counts more than attendance, and subgroup meetups with more self-driven goals and giving entrepreneurs more credit for coming up with what they want to pursue and how to pursue it. And then you might ask, well, can't you just do that anyway? And that is true. And anyone who's ever taken a self-directed reading or learning course of any kind knows there are some people who will go through the course, learn everything, be done. There are other people who procrastinate. There are other people who kind of lose interest because it's just by themselves. And this is why coffee shops exist for co-working. And sometimes you just need to be around people with the similar ideas, similar goals, interests, people to bounce ideas off of. So a community of practice is something like that, but with intentionality. So if you want to be involved with these discussions, it's not that there will be specific meetup, date, time, place. Those are interesting, but they devolve, as always in Las Vegas, into more social gatherings, or it's very tricky to stick to an agenda. So if we steer towards community of practice, interactions, and longer term, I'll say execution, the people that want to participate can, the people that don't want to don't have to. And then people that come up with things will obviously receive some sort of credit, whatever that means, in the EIR scheme. People who actually do things and are proactively interested, demonstrably so, are more likely to participate ongoing with this EIR outreach for new business and so on. You can figure out what that would mean if you're in any sort of a service, consulting, or other similar line of business, or you like working with new businesses. So the broad goal is to cut down on consensus scheduling of monthly meetups, as the value, in my opinion, I could be wrong, but in my opinion, has declined, and hand over more accountability to individuals, sort of working groups that they might form on their own. There will be 100% credit given to each person. I will say entrepreneurial, but to be adult perhaps, or responsible enough to pursue goals, to not waste the time of others in the subgroups that they want to form. If you want to not show up to a meeting that you made for you and two other people, that's on you. If you don't show up to a meeting of everyone, then that's also on you, but you may have wasted everyone's time depending on, what was supposed to be taking place at that meeting. So it reduces the strain on everybody at the table, do proactive, interesting things. And if they achieve things, then that's what counts, not attendance. And ideally, as people make progress on their ideas, because entrepreneurs on the ground will certainly have practical insights, let's turn those ideas into action. We could almost treat it like virtual hackathons ongoing if you want, or different ways to look at it. But starting with a community practice and giving people responsibility to participate when they can, but also with collaborations that they manage rather than trying to manage everyone, probably the way to go. That's what my goal is. Although we'll find out Monday what people think. There may be a whole new group after Monday. Who knows? But ideally, the outcome of this, for example, the thing that emerged from the first 5 is the resource center that we're starting, which we'll eventually have a podcast about that as things settle down and we formed the first nonprofit. There will be another nonprofit. One will be a public charity. One will be sort of a Chamber of Commerce style 501c6 organization, tax exempt. So that has emerged, although not completely originally, certainly bolstered by and sort of buoyed by the roundtable efforts and discussions. So as that emerges and takes shape, maybe even gets some grant money to begin execution, there will be an entire episode at least on that and how that will impact our economy, ecosystem, the entrepreneurs within it. And then maybe some other people have some emerging ideas. The whole idea here on that front was to basically provide a growth medium, interactively engaged proactively with other entrepreneurs with a common goal of elevating our ecosystem components, ecosystem metrics and strategy. Thank you. Knowing that those are the 3 objectives to codify, to understand, to apply, those should be motivating factors. Ideally, good things would come of that. So that's still the goal overarching. But the path to get there is clearly not it's almost like going on a tour, right? If you've ever visited another country or any place, going on a tour bus means you are kind of stuck with their schedule. You may like to wander on your own. You may like to get a group of friends. You may like to follow the tour guide and stick with the bus. We shouldn't have just one way when there are certainly many ways to do it. So hacking the Genius Roundtable will commence at the end of this month, and moving forward, July on to the end of the year and beyond. There will be a different way of trying to accomplish great things with very smart people. Smart and best intentions. So really, this is a question of how to make the most of what we have rather than trying to force what we have into what ends up being less than the most of. How'd that work? You can't have people be forced into a schedule or working arrangements or an operating mode that doesn't work for them and expect to have the best results. So it's time to hand over all responsibility that an entrepreneur should have to them to behave in this community practice model. And ideally, we'll have some of them on for some episodes of podcast. I can't promise anything because people are always busy, but I somehow show up every week. On that note, I thank you for listening. As always, don't forget, I have a podcast called Let's Innovate for Vegas. Better websites should be happening anytime soon. Copious free time. If I haven't already, I will quote a former colleague who was at a startup in East Germany when there was such a place. He said, Dan, we work 24 hours in the day and then we work at night. I know the feeling. There's tons going on. There's innovation on the Let's Innovate for Vegas side. There's entrepreneurial ecosystem on the impresario side. The impresarios are ideally my guests, not me. hopefully we'll have a guest or two. Really like to have some previous guests come on for part 2s. We've discussed the podcast could certainly go on for hours and hours, and you would love that. All of your treadmilling in one go. Anyway, on that note, I'll leave it there. Pitch workout rooms, pitch mingles, the downtown project retrospective, the roundtable. There's probably more. And in fact, there is. We just haven't actually kicked those off. Second half of 2023. It sounds like a good time for all these additional projects and experiments. On that note, thank you so much for listening. As always, be sure and share this with your friends. Tell people that there's this going on. Come on and be a guest. Tell me about your view of the ecosystem, something crazy you've done to start a business, be entrepreneurial, et cetera, et cetera. On that note, thank you so much. Bye-bye.